Welcome back to our Neumann MT48 tutorial. In the previous part, we looked at the MT48's features. In this video, we're going to set it up and show you basic operation. The MT48 is a class-compliant device, so it can be used without driver installation, at least on a Mac. But in order to get the best out of the MT48, you need to download and install the MT48 Toolkit software on both macOS and Windows. You'll find the download link on the product page at neumann.com. For demonstration purposes, we're using a Macintosh. Double-click the installer and follow the instructions. To complete the installation, you'll have to restart your computer. After restart, you'll notice a small Neumann diamond in your status bar. Right now it is grayed out, but once you connect the MT48 to the USB port of your computer, it becomes solid. It may take a few seconds before the MT48 is recognized by your computer. Now the logo has turned black, so we're good to go. We already connected our speakers to the main outputs, and we plugged this NDH30 into one of the headphone outputs. So let's get started. The first thing you may want to do is to configure the MT48 to your needs. In the menu, go to Settings and select USB I/O. This dialog has several sections. The first is Inputs routed to computer. Here you can select which input channels you want to use. Let's say you work in the box and all you need is the analog inputs and outputs. So you leave the analog inputs activated. On the right-hand side, you see that they are assigned to driver channels 1 to 4. The next entry is optical. These are 8 ADAT inputs. They would be assigned to driver channels 5 to 12, but since we don't use ADAT, let's deactivate them. Paired inputs would be external AES67 devices by merging. These can be remote controlled via the MT48, just like the internal inputs. Paired devices are the most convenient and professional option to expand the MT48. But since we don't have one of those high-end converters, we might as well deactivate pairing inputs. The next entry is analog in post effects. This is interesting because it allows you to record input signals with the EQ and dynamics processing in the mixer. You can even record with and without processing at the same time, as both feeds are available via separate driver channels. That can be handy in many situations. For instance, you can freely shape the signal on the way in, while simultaneously recording an unprocessed backup in case you went overboard. And now you see why deactivating unused inputs makes your life easier. We have the analog inputs without processing on channels 1 to 4, and on channels 5 to 8, we have the analog inputs with processing included. So there are no unused ADAT or paired channels in between. Since we don't use ADAT or paired inputs, we can of course deactivate their post-effects channels too. The last entry is the built-in mic. You only need this activated if you want to record the talkback mic in your sessions. Deactivating the talkback mic in USB I/O settings does not deactivate the talkback function in the MT48 mixer. The next section is software playback. Here we see DAW 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are the stereo mixer channels for the DAW return signal. DAW 1 is always on. That's usually your main DAW output. It's also the audio output coming from the consumer software that cannot handle multiple outs, such as media players. Per default, the second DAW channel is activated too. This can be useful for a click track, for instance. Finally, there's a third section, software playback, direct routing. These output channels bypass the mixer. In most cases, that's not what you want, but it can be useful in some scenarios. For instance, if you prefer to control your monitoring in your DAW software. But the mixer in the MT48 is usually the better option, as it has much lower latency. So that's how you set up the MT48. In the next video, we'll have a look at basic operation.